But you're going to do politics at the expense of your country.
Madam Speaker, I am a politician elected by the people of Chira. I am not one of those politicians who fear to do politics. I didn't come here to do medicine. I came here to do politics. So, Right Honorable Speaker and members, the minority report is on the whole budget, and without wasting time, I'll begin with the background. Right Honorable Speaker and members, we are opposed to the approval of the 72.376 trillion 2025-2026 annual budget unless it is restructured as we propose to address the socio-economic challenges our country is facing. Honorable Speaker and members, even if the allocations in the budget were to address the socio-economic challenges, financing the budget through reckless borrowing will cause the country even more pain. To finance this budget, the NRM government wants to borrow 32.075 trillion because taxes, non-tax revenue and grants will only generate 40 trillion. The NRM government will then splash the taxes collected and borrowed money on luxury and distribute a big portion of it to President Museveni's friends. Moreover, the Constitution and Public Finance Management Act were not followed in preparation of this budget. I want to start with the sources of funds for the budget. The government intends to raise 34.051 trillion from taxes. This represents 47% of the total budget requirements. The government will also raise 3.246 trillion from non-tax sources, representing 4.4% of the total requirement. The taxes and fees correction together will give us 51.5% of the total amount of money we require to finance the budget. Our budget will also be financed by grants worth 2.745 trillion, which is 3.7% of our financial requirement. The rest, as I said earlier, 32.07 trillion, which is 44.3%, will be borrowed from foreign and domestic financial institutions. This is the physical deficit we face as a country. Madam Speaker, I have provided the table. I don't see it on the screen. I hope it can be summarizing what I have said. Tax correction is projected at 47%. Domestic borrowing, 21 trillion, 29.5%. External borrowing, 10.6 trillion, which is 14.7%, and grants, 2.7 trillion, which is 3.7%. And then non-tax revenue of 3.2, which is 4.4%. Who will lend us the 34 trillion? Minister of Finance on page 19 of the medium-term debt management strategy is warning Parliament that because of past global recessions, concessional lending has drastically reduced. Creditors are now focused on sustaining their own economies. The biggest borrowing, 68% therefore, will be from domestic commercial banks and several other funds. Only 32% of the borrowing will be from institutions such as World Bank, IMF, ADB, and other international funds. Only 9% of the loans to be procured for budget will be on concessional terms. Only 9%. 6% at semi-concessional and 16.7% at non-concessional and commercial terms. This government committed to restrict non-concessional commercial loans to financing infrastructure and self-financing projects through on-rent agreements that have the capacity of generating non-tax revenue to enable debt repayment. It is now contracting non-concessional loans to fund recurrent expenditure. Remember, last financial year, the loan of $789 million in 2023. Overborrowing from commercial banks is crowding out the private sector and is increasing interest payment almost beyond our reach. This financial year, we are paying 9.4 trillion in interest, not 9.4%, 9.4 trillion in interest to commercial banks, mainly, and 1.8 trillion interest to foreign lenders. In the next budget, interest payment will consume, it is now 11 trillion. Minister of Finance notes that borrowing from foreign sources poses a great risk on our reserves. To be safe, the Minister of Finance notes, maturing foreign debt should be kept at a certain percentage of our reserves. Right Honourable Speaker and honourable members, reflect on the debt burden you are creating before you say aye to the budget. That's why a report on public debt, grants, guarantees, and other financial liabilities is and was tabled together with the budget. Approving the budget means you have given the government a green light to borrow 32 trillion to finance next year's budget. You have in a way lost the right to complain when the Honourable Musasi begins to vent on traffic loan requests to Parliament. Minister of Finance itself on page 8 of the medium-term debt management strategy is complaining against expenditure requirements, against realistic revenue projections, which is raising the fiscal deficit and leading to more borrowing. The medium-term debt management strategy was also presented to this House. Interest charged on the money we are borrowing has significantly risen, and our currency continues to depreciate. This, Finance is reporting, has increased the borrowing costs and worsened Uganda's debt burden amidst reduced foreign exchange reserves. Madam Speaker, I want my tables to be screened because I need to make some explanations. I am on...
Do you have that report captured?
I actually submitted this report early in the morning.
Please capture it down.
Will URA really correct the 34 trillion, the basis of which you are approving this budget? To finance the budget, Uganda Revenue Authority has now been given a 34 trillion target next financial year. This year, this current year, the target was 29.3 trillion. The taxes will be corrected as follows. If the tables were there, then I would be summarizing, and I don't have to read everything. So these tables are too long. If I read them, we'll sleep here.
Let's have it uploaded.
So what do I do, Madam Speaker? Because these tables are important.
Let's have them uploaded.
Yeah. guided, I will continue reading, but when eventually the tables are presented, you'll allow me to go back and explain, because the reason I put tables is not to read too much. I was on page 4. I'll come back to that when it is uploaded. I hope it is not deliberate. I want to go to page 6. It begins with a table. Madam Speaker and honorable members, I was explaining on page 3 coming to 6 the inability of URA to hit targets for the last 5 years. I now go to budget performance on page 6. Financial years should guide us when considering a budget with exaggerated figures. In 2020 to 2023, this Parliament approved a total budget of 52.548 trillion. The actual money raised through taxes and borrowing was 43.4 trillion. Minister of Finance issued or warranted 49.226 trillion. In 2023-2024, revised approved budget was 61.669 trillion. 50.172 trillion was warranted, but the actual money corrected and borrowed was 48 trillion. On average, we have been raising just about 50 trillion to fund our budgets. This election year could even be worse. We need to approve a realistic budget of not more than 55 trillion at worst. The reason the government presents an obscene figure is because they want to raise their amount 3% that they are authorized by the law to spend without prior parliamentary approval, which they will give to Pineti and Amina and others, and then come here for approval after. I now want to go to page 7, which is the allocation of the budget. Members, we hope they noted that we continue borrowing to pay loans. Next financial year, total borrowing is projected to be 32 trillion, of which 10 trillion is to clear maturing treasury bills and bonds. It is actually now 11, which finance likes to sanitize and call debt rollover. So the NRM government goes to a money lender and asks him to lend it to pay an old debt. We must bring this nonsense to an end. Next financial year, you have budgeted 11 trillion to pay interest on money borrowed, and only 6.5 trillion for development. This is crazy, honorable ladies and gentlemen, that your budget, the biggest portion is to pay interest and not development. The table, which I am not able to display, is giving you the summary of the budget. 38% of the budget is debt servicing, 11% is wage, non-wage is 41.1%, and government is just 9.1%. I now move to servicing public debt, which I have told you it will take 38% of our budget. And that's why we need to pay a lot of attention to this. 38% of our budget is debt servicing. A report on public debt and grants read in Parliament on March 27th. Total public debt is given on page 12 as 106.22 trillion as at December 2024. This, in our calculation, is 52.4% of the GDP, which is given as 202.7 trillion on page 3 of the budget framework paper. The government committed not to borrow beyond 52.4 of our GDP in the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. Approving this budget means you are allowing government to go against the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility, which will offend Section 12(6) of the Public Finance Management Act. The section states the annual budget shall be consistent with the National Development Plan, the Charter for Fiscal Responsibility, and the Budget Framework Paper. On page 9 of the report on loans, Minister of Finance observes there is a moderate risk of debt distress, mainly due to slow export growth and rising debt service burden, which amounted to 31.5% of revenue as of June 2024 and projected to stay above 20% throughout the medium term, mainly due to the cost of debt. Uganda has limited room to absorb economic shocks, meaning a significant economic downturn or a shock event could worsen its risk of debt distress. This is what the Minister of Finance says. To try to clear this huge debt, government has allocated 27.3 trillion, as I said, which is 38% of the total budget. And this is captured in vote 130. Interestingly, while 27.3 trillion is being allocated for debt servicing, we are seeking to borrow another 32 to fund the budget. One step ahead, two steps behind. We should at worst be borrowing less than what we are paying. You cannot repay 27 and then borrow 34. It means you are not paying. The table again, and that's why, Madam Speaker, it was important for these tables to be available. Chinese loans. China has become the biggest beneficiary of our debt servicing. This financial year, as at December 2024, we had paid China US dollar $178.744 million, equivalent of 679.2 billion. Of this 679 billion that we are paying to China, 212 billion is interest and 13.2 billion is commission and other fees. Currently, Uganda owes China 9.2 trillion. Only the World Bank with 18.3 trillion has lent Uganda more money. Chinese loans are very expensive. Look at the interest they are collecting annually. This parliament must discourage government from recklessly contracting Chinese and commercial bank loans. Again, there is a table to show you people who have lent Uganda money. I have said China is now number 2 at 9.2 trillion, and they are collecting almost $1 trillion from Uganda every year. So you come here to pass a budget, you think it is going to your constituency, it is actually going to China. Total domestic debt. The stock of domestic debt is given by Finance on page 23 of the report on loans and grants as 53.224 trillion as of December 2024. In the Treasury Operations Policy Statement, domestic debt is given as 51.7 trillion. This is mainly the money borrowed from commercial banks to finance our luxury lifestyle in the budget. Sometimes this government borrows money that is paid in 91 days. This is like ordinary people walking to a money lender. The South African banks are the biggest beneficiaries of this lending, especially Stanbic and Standard Chartered. These South African banks collect more than 9 trillion annually in interest from government. Please remember that out of the about 24 licensed commercial banks in Uganda, only 4 are owned by Ugandans. What government calls domestic borrowing is actually foreign external, because these domestic banks are foreign owned. And the list of these banks is given. So they tell you domestic borrowing, you walk to Stanbic and they take the interest to South Africa. I want you also, honorable members, to note, I am now on page 11. We have 27 trillion debt servicing. You need to know who are we paying. First, we are going to pay Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, for stolen gold. 247 billion. So this is what is in the budget that we are going to clear our debt. So one of the beneficiaries is Democratic Republic of Congo. 247 billion for stolen gold. The 27.3 trillion includes 247 billion to Democratic Republic of Congo for raping Congolese women, looting its gold, diamond and timber, when General Tibuhaburwa ordered its invasion in 1998-99. The soldiers General Tibuhaburwa deployed were accused of rape, while senior commanders and other NRM.
Is it procedure matter?
Ssemujju is my shadow minister. Those days in the 90s, we didn't have a digital system. What Honorable Ssemujju is saying here is now being heard around the world. Recently, it was stated that there was a message that was circulated about the attack of Ugandan embassy. The Ugandan ambassador was summoned, and therefore a statement to be on record that Ugandans rape Congolese women is a very serious statement. Isn't it proper that Honorable Ssemujju have this expunged from our record? Right, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable members, how do you feel like you? Because it is you, the men, the rapists, including the person reading the report. How do you feel when your country is portrayed outside there as people, looters, rapists? Why don't we use a more civilized language? You can deliver, Honorable Ssemujju, you can deliver your message, but when you're using a very polite language, these people understand. You don't have to go vulgar and say all the men, including you and everybody, are rapists.
Madam Speaker, there is a ruling. These words are in the judgment. They are not my words.
There was
I
an
don't know
appeal
where
to
the Honorable
that effect.
Ekanya lives.
There was an appeal to that effect.
There is no appeal. That's why we are paying. So if you only can allow me and give you the
But
details.
let's be civilized for once. Let's love Uganda. Let's love Uganda. When you start bringing those words, do you love your country? How many people out there are listening to what we are talking about? Your
Okay.
report is good.
Let me change.
We love the figures.
Let me change and go to a language that is okay. I am now three things. First, 225 million for damaged persons, including loss of life, serious bodily injury, sexual violence. Now I am not rape, sexual violence. Recruitment, and these are words as they appear in the judgment. Sexual violence, recruitment and deployment of child soldiers, and population displacement. The total that we are going to pay to Congo is 832 billion. The second item for which we are paying Congo is for damaged property located inside and outside Ituri. You can Google, those of you who have internet, just Google, you will find the judgment. I am not the author of the judgment. Maybe the Honorable Kanya, who is afraid of the international attention, you need to go to the International Court of Justice and tell them to delete and reverse the judgment. 60 million for damage related to natural resources,
Honorable,
including
can I have
gold.
something to say?
Honorable Speaker, I've gone to the International Court. The decision between DRC and Uganda to arrive at that figure was settlement out of court, because Uganda disputed some of the grounds. And the record is very clear. I don't know why the Attorney General cannot put the record clear, because this is a very serious matter, right, Honorable Speaker. We have Ugandans who are trading in DRC. We have Ugandans trading in South Africa. Issues of cross-border and international relationship should be handled carefully. The payment to DRC was out of settlement, out of court settlement, because Uganda disputed some of those grounds. And the records are clear. I have read it. I have followed it. is it order for the Right Honorable Ssemujju to allege that what he's stating is correct?
Honorable members.
We are paying for out-of-court settlement for
But
Ugandan
Madam Speaker, it is
forces
also unfair
entering
for someone who signed the main report to stop someone reading a minority report. Because he signed his report, he asked me.
Honorable Chair.
Thank you. Right Honorable, I would expect that we stick to our rules, and the dissent minority report must be on dissenting issues. Issues of these judgments did not come up in the meeting. And of course, if it's already a judgment, as he says, then it's a sunk cost. It's irrelevant even to discuss it. You must allocate, and there's nothing to challenge about it. So let's discuss where there is a dissent
On figures.
on the matter.
You signed the main report. You are the one who has tabled the minority.
The problem that our members have now, they are basically doing politics. But you're going to do politics at the expense of your country.
Madam Speaker,
And when you hear the chairman, yes, we have a 72 trillion. What are you dissenting on? What don't you want to be funded? And if you don't want to be funded, just say you don't want this borrowing.
Madam Speaker, I am a politician elected by the people of Chira. I am not one of those politicians who fear to do politics. I didn't come here to do medicine. I came here to do politics. Our disagreement, I signed this report with two colleagues, the Honorable Karim
It's a
Masaba.
procedural matter.
Speaker, I am raising on a matter of procedure with a lot of pain. My senior colleague, who is a veteran in this House, and hiding behind the issue of politics, seems to have derived a lot of fun and joy in destroying the reputation of this country. This House, every member of parliament in this House is part of government. Yesterday, the same speaker kept calling the matter this House, you people, and distancing himself from what happens in this House. We have a matter of collective responsibility. There are many things we don't agree with here, but once the House makes a decision, we go back with collective responsibility. So I am concerned here that, is it in order for our colleague, who stands as a member of parliament for a constituency within the center of the city, to continue to derive joy in demeaning this parliament, demeaning government, and putting a bad name to the whole country and the whole globe, that Uganda is a negative country, is a bad country, is in every way possible to be pulled down. Is he in order to move like that procedurally? I beg to request and submit.
Protect our image, not to lament here when we are the ones who began with it. And therefore, would love to raise the point of order. Whether Honorable Esenu is proper in trying to stop a member of parliament who is only trying to do his best to tell the country that let us not do certain things is in order.
Honorable member, majority. A member of a committee dissenting from a decision of the majority may state in writing the reason of dissent, and the statement of reason. Reason shall form part of the report of the committee. 2, the member of the committee dissenting from the decision of the majority shall be given time to present the statement and reasons referred to in sub-rule 1. And in preparing this statement of reason of dissent, a member of the committee shall be accorded reasonable assistance. That's okay. Now, I just want you to guide us. Where are you dissenting from with the main report?
Madam Speaker, Let me repeat, first paragraph. We are opposed to the approval of the 72.376 trillion budget unless it is restructured as proposed to address the socio-economic challenges of our country. Our disagreement is on the budget. And I am pointing out why we disagree, that Uganda cannot continue paying a debt.
Honorable Ssemujju, as a senior member in this House, we appreciate your disagreement, but bring your matters with dignity. We can disagree respectfully. That room of disagreement is there, but you don't need to bring all that destroys the country. You are raising very good points, very, very good points, but the wording matters a lot. Honorable Duru, first wait, because I know for you cannot mention some of these words with your mouth. You cannot. This, I know you. Jonah, I know there are words you cannot mention. You first sit. So you have very good points. You have really very good points. But bring it in a way that does not make people think we are only playing politics.